As we've seen time and again in the Great War of Attrition, commercial firearms would be pressed into service, particularly pistols. Our model for this episode will come from one of the oldest arms-making families in Germany. Hi, I'm Othais, and this is another pocket pistol, this time the Sauer Model 1913, and while bigger than that Bayard from last time, I'm betting you'd still like to get a closer look in the light box. Our diminutive darling this time has an overall length of 5.7 inches and weighs in just a smidge over a pound, making for a very compact pocket-style pistol. We're in the Walther Model 4 family here. This thing has a 7-round detachable single-stack magazine that is, of course, carrying 32 ACP. Now, I don't think anyone here is confused about the simple history of this gun at this point in this series, a commercial pocket pistol pressed into military service thanks to shortages during the Great War. We've seen a fair few of them at this point, but that's no reason for us not to over-explain the crap out of this thing. But first, this is Suhl, located in Thuringen, and therefore eventually in Germany. But long before that, Suhl had become the home of the Sauer family, most notably Johann Paul Sauer, who was born circa 1720 and by 1751 had entered the gun-making trade. Most of you know I will happily cover the entire history of the Sauer family, but unfortunately we have to talk about this pistol sometime today, so we're going to have to hit fast forward just for a bit. We may get lucky and find the other Sauer pistol that I would like for the Great War, at which point I'll fill in some of those gaps. But for now, let's just talk about the J.P. Sauer Company that for over a century would split its time between civilian and military arms production, all while the business was handed down from father to son over and over again, which is why we get the name J.P. Sauer and, you'll never guess this one, Sohn. You may also see the markings S and S on some of their firearms, but for much of the Sauer company's existence, that second S is actually for Spangenberg, an early partner in the business. We'll only see that name dropped just after the production of the Reichsrevolver, which Sauer did make in a consortium with V.C. Schilling and C.G. Haenel. We've also seen this same Suhl consortium before in our episode about both that Reichsrevolver and the wartime Mauser Gewehr 98. Now, as we've seen throughout this series, tying your business to martial contracts and production can be both good and bad. You essentially end up with this feast or famine cycle of manufacture, and while a business owner, your personal finances may be able to weather it, the workers, they get battered. Sometimes you need every hand you can get. Sometimes you have to fire over half your workers, and if they flee to other employment elsewhere, it can be hard to get them back when the orders come again. These were the problems that concerned Rudolf and Franz Sauer, a pair of brothers born around 1840, who are now taking charge of the family business. In order to stabilize it, they changed the focus of the Sauer concern onto sporting firearms. The company was consolidated after a century of erratic development, taken back into private ownership, and apparently no longer associated with Spangenberg. It began a more gradual but stable growth from there. Of course, there would be some exceptions for military production. They were just not top priority anymore. You can see this break off in the form of the Reichsrevolver Model 1883, which was produced by Haenel and Schilling without Sauer. They only produced the 1879. With the new emphasis on sporting arms, J.P. Sauer began making a name for itself as a high-quality manufacturer. There was plenty of success found in producing superior rifles and shotguns, but this is a show about a handgun. While Sauer had done a number of military pistols over the past century and had continued to produce single-shot dueling target pistols, your average civilian tastes were distinctly pointed away from their then present catalog in, say, 1899. Their first attempt to fix this would be the licensed production of the Bear pistol starting in 1900, a double-barrel, 4-shot, manually rotating thing. It was essentially an attempt at a hybrid revolver and Derringer. The Bear emphasizes compact personal defense, which was 100% the direction of the market at its release. Unfortunately for Sauer, they were beaten by a better gun. John Browning's FN 1900 was just about as compact and yet provided a slide-operated detachable box magazine 32 ACP semi-automatic pistol. As we've covered repeatedly, the FN 1900 would create a huge market for pocket pistols and became the de facto minimum feature set. So the Bear flopped, which, while frustrating, wasn't enough to hurt Sauer. By this time in 1901, the company was reported as having 250 employees, with employees working 11 to 13 hours a day, 6 days a week. So I'm assuming sales of other products were pretty good. Benefits packages, probably not so great though. With that kind of industrial base, Sauer could absorb one poor seller and would return to the pistol market around 1903, this time with a semi-automatic, licensed from George Roth, or Georg Roth. This became the Roth-Sauer pistol, compact with a proprietary 32 caliber cartridge and firing from a locked breech. A lot about this gun was modern. Unfortunately, it was a slow seller, most likely because the cartridge was no better than 32 ACP, making it needlessly complicated, and was only used in this one pistol. Plus, it was a stripper clip loader. Only a few thousand would be produced through 1910. Interestingly, the Roth-Sauer would still see some Marshall purchases from Germany, and hopefully we'll get to explore that someday in detail. For now, I'd like to just point out that the Roth-Sauer was mostly a creation of Carol Krinka and shares the same development lineage and most of its operating principles with the Roth-Steyr 1907. That gun also lovingly called the Roth-Krinka on our episode that covers this particular gun. What is a bit hazy is how much work was done by another man. You see, Krinka definitely designed the majority of the Roth pistol system, but when handed over for actual production, there would have to be alterations in order to make it ready for being produced en masse. This work was likely handled by Sauer's chief of design, Fritz Zehner, who apparently was inspired by the process. And as the Roth-Sauer production was wrapping up, Zehner would start implementing his own ideas and improvements. Now, Zehner mostly protected his ideas with what was known, and actually still known, as a Gebrauchsmuster, which I don't speak German, so let's put that into English, a utility model or a utility patent. This was a sort of limited patent, which at the time protected the inventor for only 6 years. They only work on products and not processes, but they publish immediately and have a much lower bar of examination and investigation, making them handy for staying nimble in production environments that are very competitive. The downside of these is that once they were done, they were just destroyed. They weren't retained like normal patents, so I don't have those drawings to show you. I just have references to them. He would first lock down a unique trigger mechanism and transfer bar, and then he would have a true patent for his magazine safety, which means we can see the document for this doohickey. I'll tell you more about how to use it, but at least I finally can show you a dang drawing. From there, we also get more utility patents for the slide, the hold open, the safety, and other bits and various bobs. So that doesn't leave us a lot to explore on paper. So that means we're gonna have to actually look at a real example. Now, in this case, I need to say a special thank you because this is the first style of Sauer pistol, not actually the one that should have been fielded in the war. We'll get there in a moment. So I want to say, number one, it's good to know someone who's very capable 32 ACP collector, and two, it's nice when they're willing to ship you things, so thank you, Paul. Let's all thank Paul. This is an original Sauer self-loading pistol. No Bear, no Roth, a purely in-house design by Zehner. And let's get a closer look at what he came up with. Alright guys, this is the Sauer pistol, and you'll recognize Sauers by their tubular style slides, squared up bodies, and compact nature. This overall look would be applied to a number of guns for plenty of decades, but this This gun is surprising in that it looks very, very plain and yet has a couple really weird features. But let's talk about what's normal first. I've got a heel release magazine. All right, 7 rounds, goes in there. Ignore what I'm doing for a second. And then we have a manual safety with safe and fire. Pull the trigger, the gun would go bang if we had chambered around. We do that, by the way, by just racking this slide. This whole thing is the slide. I'm gonna pull it back. She's blow back with an ejection port on the right. There's no lock open, so after the last round, she just closes on up, so you might have one dry fire at the end if you're not paying attention. Fixed barrel concentric recoil spring, that's why the big round slide. On the surface and with all that covered, nothing truly unique or fascinating about this gun. I mean, other than just sort of being fairly handsome, right? Well, let's get into what makes this gun weird. Number one, the magazine. So I'm gonna release this mag. I want you to pay close attention to this little dot right here. All right, let me see if I can, there we go. Watch it. Pip. See that little pip? So with that, the magazine safety is engaged. The trigger cannot be pulled. If I reload the magazine, throw it back in the gun, nothing. If I chamber around, nothing. It's gonna stay just like that until you manually click that button back down. I assure you, having handled this gun for a couple days, that gets old really fast. Like, that's a lot of work to make a feature that nobody asked for. Just a personal opinion. The other cool feature about this gun is something that you might not be able to see very easily. I'm gonna try to show it to you, let's see. Looking at the front of this gun, looking in the trigger guard, up top, get my patented plastic and pokey. We are trying to see up in here in front of the trigger, there's sort of a gap. You might be able to see a piece of metal. Well, that's because there is a manual lock open on this gun. So this part's terrifying. If I stick my finger in the trigger guard and push upwards and then rack the slide back, it'll lock open. Now, of course, I can just pull that back, let go, chamber the round. I wrote it on that case because I'm not snapping this guy around. This is a nice gun. That's one way, but this gets more terrifying. Let me do this whole horror show again. Now I'm gonna show you the wrong way to do this, because you can, in theory, well, not in theory, in practice, you can simply just pull this trigger. So I'm just gonna, yep, like that. That readied the gun. It didn't fire it. You can tell because our trigger is still forward. On this particular gun, which I'm not gonna dry fire, if you pull the trigger slacks all the way to the back of the action. You can feel when the trigger is cocked, or when the system's cocked or not through the trigger. This is cocked still. It has not discharged the firing pin. So that first pull just readied the gun, and the second pull would allow you to fire it. That's your slide release, the trigger. Wow. Okay. So unique to this early pattern of the gun as well, as the magazine release and all this other stuff, is, let me get to the rear here, is our takedown and our sights. So if you look, our rear sight is milled into the cocking knob, which is screwed onto the slide. And there's 2 holes in the back. One of them has this dimple poking through. That's just a plunger for a spring. That's attached to the firing pin. But this hole right here, well, that's our takedown. So in order to pull this gun apart, we're gonna need a tool. In this case, I'm using a detent style punch because I want to make minimal surface contact with this thing. I don't want to scratch it up for poor Paul, but I do want to show you what's going on here. So all I have to do is actually fairly gently poke this plate and start rotating. Now, I found that can be difficult when you don't have much surface area to work with. So I tend to, terrifyingly enough again, I tend to cock the action, get this guy back, get this pin down in here without scratching anything. And then I'm just gonna get the turn started, just a bit. It doesn't have to go very far because that plunger only engages for maybe 1/8 of a turn. Now I can go ahead and terrifyingly drop that, and I can start rotating this guy off. I don't have to worry about that plunger anymore. It just takes a few turns. Just keep turning. You know how it goes. I got a little bit of a snag. Let me see here. Rack her back and walk her. There we go. It's just snagged on the body of the gun. Keep rotating. and we're free. We have our spring. By the way, this thing is not filthy. This is actually a combination of grease and oil. She's actually in really clean shape in there. We're gonna leave her packed the way she is. This is a fantastic example. Get this guy forward. We have our concentric recoil spring. We have our bolt, which just lifts away. Get that out of there. Whoop. Which has an overhead guide. We have our extractor on the right-hand side. We have our striker down in, and this guy is free to come loose, although covered again in beautiful grease, keeping it in original condition. So simple little tiny striker in there. Simple little bolt, all blowback, all 32 ACP. Bog standard in terms of being just a 32 ACP blowback pocket pistol, except, of course, again, for the really wild design of this magazine disconnect and this slide hold open and the fact that your trigger is your slide release. By the way, in this position, since I haven't had to dry fire the gun, we can clearly see that that trigger sits pretty far back when we're not cocked. Really obvious. Thanks to their introduction in 1913, this design would eventually become known as the Model 1913, but at that time it was just marketed as the Sauer and Sohn self-loading pistol. Sauer also sought foreign sales, that is a tongue twister, and would market in England, France, and beyond. While there would be variations over time, generally we see an English spelling on Son for exports, and a specification that the production was done in Prussia. For those of you who pay very close attention, you probably noticed that this gun, not only in addition to being one of the first ones, is also one of the exports, so it's pretty dang cool. Again, this is the first variation of what would be the Model 1913 family. It wouldn't take long for Zaner to adjust his pistol a bit to better perform in the market. These changes often come in fits and spurts, and you may see some overlap or reappearing features over a transitional period of production. But overall, to go from the first variation to the largely second, we'll see the overly complicated magazine safety dropped. The earliest version had a rear sight cut into the rear cap, as we saw. Takedown, again, was done with a hole through the rear. This was simplified to a combination lock spring and rear sight. Conceptually, this is actually tracking all the way back to the Bear pistol, which used a sprung rear sight to lock that flat cylinder. Now again, obsessive friends with a love of 32 ACP, I do have a second model, so let's get a closer look at what's going on here. Behold the second variation. Gone is our weird magazine button. Nobody wanted that. But we have kept our terrifying ability to lock the slide open, so why not go for that? Oh man, I hate that. Okay, so with that back though, I can get you over to our front camera and we can see we have a beautifully knurled rear cap like before, but with no sight notch in it. Instead, our sight is set on a spring that therefore holds the cap. So this is actually a good combination of parts, right? We got one thing doing two things. In order to get into the gun now, you simply depress this guy and then rotate. And then you're clear. Like you get a few passes in and you're out. You're into the gun. I don't need to take it all the way apart because internally it's the same beast. You guys already saw all this, but cool to know, right? On reassembly, you just screw this in until you get about to here. You hold this down, you keep coming over, and then honestly, you'll over travel, at which point you can just walk her back. Oh, did I just do it perfect? Dang. Over travel, walk it back until you hear the click. Once you have the click, you know, because this guy has set down into that notch that you can see on the cap. No tools, no nothing. Is a solid improvement. So realistically, the gun has become simpler in construction and yet better overall as a product. That's terrific. All right, that's really the major difference. So let's take a closer look inside the action and see how this functions, because this is the one that's going to go into the war. We'll do that with the help of one of Bruno's animations.
First, we'll load up our detachable box magazine retained by a simple heel catch, which shares a spring with the sear. Looking at the trigger, we'll see a stepped engaging surface. This is part of the disconnector. It works against the combination sear and transfer bar. When the trigger is pulled, the transfer bar is driven rearward, and then it tips into the step on the trigger, disengaging until it is released to reset. At the other end, we can see the sear surface of the transfer bar, holding the striker rearward until we pull the trigger. When the pistol discharges, the slide, bolt, and striker are driven rearward, and then returned by the recoil spring, which is when the striker snags on the bar again and transfers the striker's spring pressure down to the trigger. Now, when we release, the trigger extends and the bar steps back down. The safety is just a metal lug turned into the path of the trigger. A simple block. The recoiling slide is returned by a large concentric spring evenly wrapped around the barrel. Extraction is to the right, with the ejector set low and to the left. Alright, back to the history.
Now, around the time Sauer was transitioning into these new second models, they also started offering custom finishes, barrels, and other features that might be more at home in the sporting gun catalogs. Unfortunately, you almost never see any of them because with the gun introduced in 1913 and then sometime over the next year refined into an improved model, there wasn't much time before war were declared.
Hello? Yeah.
And when the Great War turned out to be just a wee bit longer than anyone expected, Sauer would be forced back into military contracts. Whether they did so voluntarily or not, I don't know. It doesn't really matter though, because it was the only way to continue existing. Financially, there was no way to survive otherwise. We've seen their name associated with rifle production in our series, again in consortium with Schilling and Haenel. And don't get me wrong, rifle production was paramount, but handguns were also in short supply. Since Sauer had production lines already up and running and personnel already trained to make these guys, it was a no-brainer to keep them rolling out. At first, the handgun here was offered as more of a personal private purchase, plus an option for German police during the war. But by 1917, perhaps before, that's just the soonest I know of it, they were listed in the Ministry of War's approved non-ordnance sized pistols. That means officers could buy them through the ministry, and that meant that they were officially in, inventory. That was, by the way, at a price of 37 marks. Now, proof marks for the 1913 vary. The gold star is an eagle on the front of the trigger guard, but these are not always present. Instead, you usually just get a crown over a Gothic letter. That odd starish looking thing over the N is just a regular commercial proof mark. The smaller crown over Gothic letter is the service indicator. Okay, we've covered the pistol. We know it was used in the war. That means we can now hand it over to Mae for a demonstration. Unfortunately, being a pocket pistol, yet again I could not pin down any accounts of actual use of these little guys. The 1913 was always, in essence, an emergency secondary weapon. An officer's handgun for immediate defense, or at worst, to assert authority. Still, the Sauer self-loader remained a fairly popular police pistol, and you can often find them marked as such on the inside front of the grip. Some wartime pistols will also have regimental marks here in the same spot too. A complete list of all these marks and their meanings is not something that we can cover here, though your research may vary. These guns were actually pretty popular with the police, and the post-war depression created enough crime concerns that Sauer continued to produce and sell these handguns into 1922, some of the worst years for arms sales. So that says a lot about how well they were respected in some regard. Like other arms, you can find Sauers with the 1920 inventory mark. This was applied to guns in government inventory in order to prevent their theft, as there was briefly a bounty system in place for the population to turn in found guns. The fear was unmarked guns would be stolen in order to be returned and resold to the government all over again. Now, the photo I just showed you reveals a bit about a mystery for me. As we saw earlier, both versions of this handgun so far have the same manual safety, which only blocks the trigger from moving. That means a solid, sharp drop could, and probably did on occasion, inertially trip the transfer bar and release the sear. That means a bad blammo. Now, this was not unique to the Sauer, and a 1923 report from the Ministry of the Interior revealed the same, recommending that a variety of pistols only be carried with empty chambers. This, of course, is not an ideal reputation to have, and so Sauer supposedly responded to this concern. The problem is we clearly have a gun sporting the solution. That is right here. Ooh, a third one. This one's the one that was marked 1920. Yep, so either this marking is fake, or the 1920 mark was used for quite a few years, or Sauer had proactively solved their own problem just after the war, but before the inventory system. Regardless, we now have the third pattern of Sauer 1913, an immediate post-war adaptation whose only real change was the addition of a second locking bar set under the safety. This would block the transfer bar and prevent any risk of discharge from dropping the gun. I usually don't cover things that are post-war, but there's so many Type 2s and Type 3s out there, I know I'm going to get a lot of questions about it. Also, in the years immediately after the war, Sauer would introduce a 25 ACP version of the 1913, often called the 1319. This gun is clearly beyond our scope today, and you know what it is on sight. We're keeping it firmly on the 1913, and honestly, it can be hard to say when that gun stopped production. I call it in 1926 because that's when the next major model, the export variation, was introduced. This is often known as a transitional model because it bleeds into the production of still more tubular slide blowback operated handguns of the same rough size and similar mechanism. Paul has assured me he'll be ready to loan us the whole kit and the caboodle when we're ready. But again, we're a World War I show for a moment, so even this is a bit beyond. We'll stick to our Type 2. I will share one ever so slightly post-war factoid with you. With the collapse of the German economy, many towns started issuing their own script, which were often more stable than the national mark. The arms-making town of Suhl was no exception, releasing 25 Pfennig coupons, which could be traded in at the magistrate's treasurer for real cash. It's worth noting that among the iconic firearms they chose to depict, we can clearly see a Sauer 1913 doing its best to give peace of mind in troubled times. Alright everyone, that's going to wrap it up for the history lesson on this diminutive darling, but we still have a little bit more to do for the show because we have to get a practical opinion from Mae on what it's like to shoot the Sauer 1913. Alright gang, it doesn't take a lot of room to fit this guy, and not a lot of room for Mae, so let's go ahead and get your impressions on the Sauer 1913 though. In this case, of course, we will start with the ergonomics, and while certainly alluring in its beauty, I think we can work up a little bit more of a case for how we feel about it.
So when I first handed this guy, it is a small 32. I mean, at least I can almost get a full finger grip on there, but the problem is that even with my hand not quite Othais size, it still doesn't quite fit. It still feels a little short, so I wish it had a little more length to it. But I can at least grip up high. That nice beaver tail back here, it sticks out pretty far for me. For you, I think it's a different story. Yeah.
So the gun is set up with a slight undercut under the trigger guard. It's set up with a nice deep beaver tail. The idea is that you can choke up on this gun, get a little closer to that bore axis.
Makes me think of something like the Savage or the Walther in that respect.
Yeah, it's nice in terms of contour. The problem is I am a modern and large American, and my big meaty skin flap goes just ever so slightly past the beaver tail. So the first time I shot this gun, the whole slide comes back. That's fine.
Yeah, sure.
On the way forward, though, there's that striker-sear interacting surface that just grabbed a hunk of flesh and brought it on along with it. So I ended up being sucked into the mechanism. And
it was a very unfortunate experience for him on range.
Yeah, I did not enjoy it at all. So let me give that back to you because that's not going to be my go-to because I have to consciously choke down on it. But I don't think a lot of people were my size in World War I, and especially not fat-handed. So
no, so if they were closer to my size, it would have been a reasonable sized beaver tail there.
Other than the grip, what do we got going on?
So it feels a little bit weird ergonomically in that it's a little weighted up top, so it kind of feels like almost all of the mass of that 1.8 pounds is sitting on top of my hand, which is just a little bit unusual feeling. It feels like I can basically hold the gun like this and there's almost nothing down here.
Yeah, I can see it kind of rolling over as you handle it.
Yeah, it's kind of top heavy in that respect, which we'll talk about that and how to fix the shooting on it, I would say, in a bit. Other than that, the slide, you know, this is actually a very strong spring in there. I don't want to emphasize or state that it is otherwise. However, I'm able to operate the slide on this one no problem, and I didn't short stroke it at any point because this cocking knot back here, it's so big and pronounced that there is no way I am losing my grip on that one, which is great. I love that.
Yeah, it's almost more of a cocking cap, too. It's kind of weird. You look at it and you think like...
I think cocking knob, but you're right, it's more like a cap.
You think like Nambu or, from or stop or something. Like it looks like it's going to separate.
Shape back here.
But all it is screwed onto the slide.
Yeah. It's great.
Yeah.
Works just fine. The safety on this one, so again, on range, I was able to operate it one-handed without changing my grip. And I want to say, again, without changing my grip. It's not that hard, but dear God, the amount of 32s where the safety is on the back of the gun, that causes me to manipulate my hand around it.
We've handled a lot of 32s.
Yeah.
Like last episode was the Bayard. We've seen, I'm looking at the wall to cheat it right now because there's a bunch on the wall still.
Yeah.
We got like the Beretta and the FN 1900.
The Langenhahn?
Yeah, the Langenhahn.
Oh God, that one was weird too because it was long and it had such a big swoop to it.
FN 1910, Walther Model 4, Frommer Stop, like all these guns that we can think of, all of them have safeties.
Yeah.
Either, grip safety for the stop, but most of them have safeties that are like a back and to the left. Like they're all at the rear of the gun.
Yeah.
And
it's just so awkward to have to manipulate. I mean, I think we talked about this before off camera at one point, but I could kind of understand that maybe they were going for something like you want to be able to take it off of safe while it's holstered.
Or pocketed, because that's the thing, they're pocket.
That's true.
I think they're literally pocket pistols. I think the idea was, you're going to reach into your pocket, and as you reach into your pocket, you're going to throw that safety off, and then grab the gun. But then put your finger right on that trigger while you're pointing at your own appendix. That's a good idea.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think one that has a decent safety location, probably the Ruby. I think
it's the only one I can think of that had a safety.
The only one was shot so far.
You don't have to break your grip to use it.
Right. It's pretty easy to operate.
This one you don't have to break your grip.
Yeah, not too bad.
So the point being is that's pretty dang good.
For a 32, yeah.
If you look at the market, that's
for the pocket pistols of World War I. That's pretty good.
Okay, so usable safety, remarkable.
Right, remarkable. The mag release on this one, so
now we're back in the bag.
Yeah, okay, so it is a heel release on that one, which does kind of suck, but at least the mag has a little bit of a toe extension right here, which is kind of nice. And I will say this one, it does kind of come out pretty easily. So it does have a positive release to it that always pops it out a little.
I also want to point out, I like push forward heel releases more than I like push back.
I do too, because when you go to grip, it feels way more natural to pull in than it does to push out.
Well, you pull the release in while you grab the toe and you can yank that thing out.
Right. This is a much more natural thing to do than it is to do something that's a weird, like, a game of push out, pull down. Like, what is that?
Well, yeah, because then you're trying to, like, hold the magazine and push away and pull the magazine out and let go and re-grip the magazine and take,
Right. The only thing that might equally be as easy to use as something that's a pull-in heel release would be as if it was a button, so that it was just a button that gave you more purchase, like you'd be pushing into the gun, which would also give you the ability to flex down.
We saw that
easily.
On...
something. What was it?
It was the Webley self-loading pistol.
Oh, right.
But that
that's
was not
right.
a 32.
No, that was not a 32. But yeah, no, that was actually a good idea. Ergonomics and the other thing. I kind of don't like this hold open for the slide. So it's cool. I like the idea that they thought of doing that. I really do.
It has one.
Yes, it has one.
Because again, going through the litany of like 32s we've seen, almost none of them have a hold. I'm really trying to think of ones that had hold opens other than like the Ruby again.
Right.
And then I guess sort of like the Steyr Piper where you could open the flip up barrel. Mm-hmm. But there's not a lot.
No, it's not really a feature they think to add with it. So I kind of like that they did that. But the problem is that reaching into the trigger guard, also releasing it, I have to pull the trigger. That's kind of weird.
No, but design-wise, it's extremely efficient to just have that hook in there.
Yes.
And to not have all this extra stuff on the side of the gun. Mm-hmm. It's very clean. It's just something that we don't regard as very well because we have that whole, like, keep your finger out of that trigger guard area. That was not an attitude they had at that time.
Right.
So in terms of design work, that's pretty smart.
It was smart for their time. I will say it was something that people of their time would use well.
Now, how about releasing that slide?
Yeah, again, I don't like the fact that I'm pulling the trigger on that. It's something about that super unsettling. I mean, I get it, that it's not actually discharging the round, that you're not firing it, that the trigger's not...
What's not to love about being like, hey, let me show you my gun. I'm going to reach in the trigger guard and I'm going to pull this goodbye. See, it's locked open now.
Yeah.
All right, let me just close that for you. Yeah, nothing terrifying about everything I just did there, right, guys?
I'm not a big fan on that. I get it. It was with the times. It made sense. Doesn't quite make sense for today now, does it?
I still like the utility of it, though.
Fair.
You're thinking about the end user and their ability to interact with that firearm and get what they wanted to done. As people who work with firearms, you want to have a safety where you can operate it, or else you're not really going to rely on it, You're going to want to have the ability to lock open the gun because for lots of reasons, for clearings or inspection or cleanings or whatever, lock open's great. You want to be able to release that lock open without necessarily recocking the action. Okay, we gave you an option for that. It's not a separate switch because now we've doubled up on functionality. And in a weird way, it's kind of sublime. Like, why add another lever to the gun? We'll just let you push this way on the trigger and it locks it open and pull this way on the trigger and it closes.
Yeah, they did actually also add it in such a way that it's not really an extra button or thing to slide. Like they really did make it into the gun, which is fantastic.
And it also helps with the fact that it is compact because this is a design challenge to make this as small as possible. So I give it to Sauer. There's a lot of sort of duplication of parts here. Again, we see it with the sight. The rear sight is the lock for the cap. Like duplication. It's beautifully designed. There's a lot of intelligence behind it.
I can totally agree.
The utility point now 100 years later is frankly terrifying.
Yes.
Okay, so on that note, we've now successfully not shot ourselves with the gun getting it ready to shoot it.
Hooray.
What's it like to actually shoot the Sauer 1913?
So lining up my sights, looking at it from the rear, it kind of reminds me of a Nambu just because of how bulbous this cocking cap is back here. Okay. It's a little bit weird because it feels like that fills most of my vision. It's just this big old round thing. And then I have a tiny sight up top. It's a 32, so we expect the sights to be tiny, but unfortunately, I would wish they were even just a little bit taller. Even just a few millimeters would make a difference.
I'm going to call it, it's like a nipple sticking off a boobie. It's just what it is.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's unfortunate that that's most of my vision is just that.
Right.
So it's a little bit, I don't know, I didn't reset as well as I would have liked to have with it. That is unfortunate.
Well, don't blame Sauer just because you became distracted.
I did get distracted.
By your urges. And not the fact that it is a very small sight.
Yeah, let's go with that. Sure. Okay. And then we already went to the action. The trigger, it's not a bad single stage. It's a little bit heavier than what I expected,
I found
though.
it to be frankly
No. It's smooth. I'll give it that. It is actually smooth, but it is very heavy. Like, what is that? I did notice that.
It's like worryingly heavy because I can never. The other thing is the way the safety goes to safe on the down position. Mm-hmm. So I had a habit of whacking that safety.
Yeah, you did.
And so I would go, wait, am I unsafe? No, I'm not. Like, it's just
That's just what it is.
It became this game of, like, it takes you a second to figure out whether you're unsafe or not because it's so heavy.
That is a bit unfortunate, but, I mean, at least you're probably not going to have an accidental discharge with that. There is that. You're going to have to positively pull through.
Yeah, it's dared me to have a few, but I won't actually do it.
It's true. And then the recoil in this one. I will say it was snappier than what I was expecting, but I kind of get why because, well, that day we went and shot the Bayard. We shot this one and something that's coming along the line. But I came off of the Bayard and onto this one, and I guess it was just snappier than what I was expecting, but it makes sense. There's more weight up top and...
Well, you go from the Bayard to this and you think, oh, this will be a lot easier.
Right.
And it's not really any easier.
No, surprisingly not.
No.
But that's okay. It wasn't unmanageable. It was just not expected, I suppose.
I'd put it there with the Walther Model 4.
Yeah.
It honestly, all the way around, this thing feels a lot like a Walther Model 4 when you're actually firing
When
it.
you're actually handling it,
Right.
yeah. I would agree.
Now, did you happen to notice, by the way, when you ran out of ammo? Because there is something, these guns don't lock open, but the trigger does not reset when they're out. Like, the trigger is borne out on the cocking pressure.
Yeah, that's true.
So you're supposed to be able to feel...
There's a bit of a positivity to it.
Like, I'm sorry, you shouldn't say when you're out of ammo. It's when you fire dry, essentially, when you're decocked. So it's supposed to be a lot like a... I'm trying to think of how to explain it. It's a very positive difference in the trigger. You will get one dry fire out, but then if you were to grab this gun and it wasn't ready to fire, or cocked, I should say, because you could have an empty chamber cocked. But there is sort of a cocking indicator, which is the trigger, because it doesn't reset all the way. Do you think that really stands out as particularly useful, or does it feel just sort of like, okay?
It wasn't really, it didn't feel particularly useful to me.
Because of the lack of chamber indication?
Yeah, there's no real...
Yeah.
Nothing really remarkable. But yeah, that pretty much covers it for shooting. I like that I got 7 rounds. That's pretty decent, but it is 7 rounds of 32, so...
Yeah.
Unfortunate.
So I guess that does kind of get us into the question of, would you use this in a fight, like in a conflict? I understand we've always said that we're not great on 32 ACP, but assessing the rest of the weapon on top of that, how's it doing?
You know, for me... the problem comes with just the size of this guy, the fact that it's 32. Yes, I've got 7 rounds, but unfortunately, I just don't think that there's enough there. I like that I've got some extra features with it. I like that the features that you said that had some duplicity to them, where they had dual use. Like, that was fantastic, and there's just some real ingenuity into this gun. There was some real thought into it for the shooter, for trying to make it more functional and give you more with it. But the problem still comes with... It's still 32. I've still only got 7 rounds. It's still really tiny. I can't feel like this is what I would want to defend myself with. This feels like the backup to my backup gun.
My whole problem with these smaller scale 32s comes from sort of this. May I borrow that for a second?
Sure.
So here, why don't you draw this gun? How much do you feel like your grip is perfect?
It isn't, because...
Right, okay, hold on, let's try that again. Draw this gun. Okay, you got deep on it.
I did.
Are you straight?
No, I'm not straight. That's a problem.
Yeah.
That's a massive problem.
These narrow grips make it really hard to get in, narrow and short.
Yes.
It makes it really hard to get onto the holster. Not that we had one for this gun, but
Right.
I've noticed. You get up on that holster or wherever you're keeping it and trying to square your hand perfect every time when there's so much room to grab it bodily but be wrong.
It's bad.
Yeah, there's no way I feel confident deploying something like this in a hurry, even if it had a good cartridge, blah, 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 yada.
Right.
That is the thing I think that I finally put my finger on with these little 32 pockets that bother me.
I did notice. Yeah, that honestly is difficult to grip this one quickly. And yeah, I've got that nice deep beaver tail so I can grip up high, but even at that, that's not naturally my grip falls. I have to adjust, and that's not good.
These feel like fiddle guns.
Yes.
Like, let me get it right. I'm going to get you. Just give me a moment. Like, it's just... And then on top of it, you only got 7 rounds. They are 32. Now, there are guns that you've said soft yeses to in the 32 category.
That's true, but they've been more like the Savage, where it's got like 10 rounds of 32. That's pretty good.
Thicker grip, double stack, much easier to get yourself up on it, and the gun runs.
Yep.
No, so far for us that you've seen in this series, my favorite 32s are going to be like the Ruby or the Long and Han. Big full grips that allow you to sort of get up on that gun and feel like you're controlling it.
Yep.
Regardless of what ammo is in there.
I would agree.
I'm going to agree with you. I can't see myself wanting to defend myself with something like this.
It's just no big security with that one.
The quality's there. It's just the ergonomics are not.
Needs some improvement.
Okay, well, I think that'll take care of us for today. So stay tuned after the credits for updates, and otherwise have a good one.
Night, guys.
Alright gang, for those of you who are watching this as a time capsule, or if you've tuned in more recently but just haven't caught our announcements, just to be aware, we are currently demonetized on the YouTube platform. Now, the reason for that is not entirely clear. We have only one clue to go on, which is this removed video of Mae using the Lewis gun. It's already featured in our main episode on the Lewis gun, so I'm not sure why being on its own was a problem, but hopefully one day we will find out. In the meantime, if you do like the content and would like to support it since YouTube does not, you may go over to Patreon or Subscribestar or check out our shop or anything else you'd like to do to make sure that this documentary series is still produced. Now, of course, this is all done and made possible by you guys finding value in it. We have always been primarily funded by patrons and then secondarily funded by people who buy our merchandise. So while a nuisance, this will not be the end of Primer. Our only concern is that we would like every opportunity to help the series grow, as we still consider ourselves to be somewhat in our pre-teen years in terms of our ability to actually grow the channel. Alright, thank you again for all the support, and if you're curious about more on this topic and maybe alternative platforms, things like that, there's 2 ways to investigate that. 1, Carl and I did a video about monetization a little while ago, and 2, those of you who are patrons, either through Patreon or Subscribestar, Mae and I will, of course, have our usual bi-weekly conversation about the status of the show, and we'll explore a little bit about alternative platforms. Alright, have a good one. Bang. Bang. All right, you wrap her up. Bang. 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 Bang.
Back here empty.